entire thing of exterminating these people was a top secret thing.
Well, and I will say, so, if we go as far as to say that, for the mass majority of the population, they were protected from knowing the really horrific truth. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Zero Bunker. Back for another podcast. G and CJ here. If this is your first time here, welcome. Consider sticking around, subscribing, or wherever you are on whatever platform.
How long we've been at it with this, man?
This is. Do you want me to actually check what official? I want to.
A couple of months now. It's got to be.
Yeah, it's been a couple of months. Let me see here. I'm pulling up the channel. We are officially on episode 18.
Nice.
So, yeah, 18.
Nice. Yeah. Well, just take the opportunity to thank everybody who has supported us thus far. We truly grateful for it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really been awesome. I personally enjoy this. It's been nice to sit down and learn a little history, get to just have an open-ended conversation, get some stuff off our chest. And a lot of you guys out there have been awesome about interacting and giving us kind of your feedback and whatnot. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So obviously, we're in the middle of the summer, man. It's hot as shit. I mean, it's been, 110, 109
it's
around here in Texas?
Incredibly hot. And let me tell you something, guys. I had the brilliant idea to walk 4 miles to the Zero Bunker today from my place.
That's some crazy motivational shit, man. With no silkies either.
I just wanted to, I felt like rucking, I felt like I was getting a little soft and I needed to step it up.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, what's interesting, yesterday, I ended up, I'm a big movie guy, man. And yesterday I kind of took a moment to actually sit down and rewatch Schindler's List. So I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's super powerful movie which talks about the Holocaust and about the deeds of one person who was taken advantage of, making money as a business, turning into, doing humanitarian deeds of saving thousands of Jewish lives. And it kind of made me think, man, that we cover about a lot of things about history and different, modern stuff and just kind of shoot the shit. And the Holocaust is a subject that's very touchy to this day. And I figured that we, should probably take a stab at it just because it's something that we should never forget.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think that what's interesting about Zero Foxtrot has been that, your brand hasn't really shied away from some of the dark reality of things, and it's not always necessarily to necessarily like have humor about it or anything like that, but it's just like bringing attention to things that are reality that sometimes it's hard to face, right? Like, and the Holocaust in itself, I don't know if you would agree, but I can only think that that's got to be really the biggest black eye of our humanity,
absolutely, man. I mean, to kind of get, just looking at numbers and statistics of all the people that died and just the way it was carried out and why it was carried out. And you're absolutely right. I mean, there have been some dark moments in our history, but I think that this really takes the cake. So what do we do so we don't repeat this, Right. I mean, and to think about it, this thing only happened like 60, 70 years ago. I mean, you still have survivors.
Yeah, I want to say it was in 1935, I believe. Was
essentially what happened was like, a lot of people have. But first off, there's a lot of people that actually don't believe this thing even happened. Like, there's a lot of like.
How do you get there? Like, what? I'm trying to even rationalize that.
I've never had a conversation with a guy who says, but there's so much evidence about everything. You know what I mean? But here's the deal, dude. You got people that don't believe in God. You got people that, they're gonna have their own opinions. You know what I mean? I get
flat earthers.
Yeah. But with something that's so just there in your face, I would dare anybody to go visit one of the concentration camps in Poland or in Germany and to really see or talk to somebody who's had the experience of being there, I mean, I just even if I want to take a net neutral side and say, you know what, okay, let me hear your thoughts. It's really hard to,
it's one thing we hear, and look, and I'm not saying that it's always conspiracy theorists, but you hear some of these guys that take extremist approaches on things like you're going to have an Alex Jones that's going to like pull off like that school shooting was all fake and this and that. And kids lost their lives. It was an incredibly sad moment. That's one thing. And then, but then to say, well, 6 million Jews died, but it was just, that didn't happen. It was a cover up, or it was like, I don't know how you even get there.
I don't know. But the reason why we want to talk about this is, at least from my aspect, it's also to kind of get into, how dark the human mind can actually go.
Oh,
you know what I mean? The Holocaust, there's no way we could sit there and cover it in an hour or 3 hours or 10 hours. But I think it's important to look at kind of like the whole mentality behind it, about how it happened and what maybe could have prevented it from being happening.
So let me ask you this, man, and before we're going to get into some of the murky waters and talk about some of the horrific stuff that happened, but I'm before we even get there, I am curious about that mindset, right? Like I'm curious about us getting there, because so I was in a conversation with somebody not that long ago, and this is for those of you that have ever been curious about things like religion and morality and things, and you get into one of these deep conversations. We were talking about whether or not religious motives, or like having a religious guideline, is really necessary for kind of certain morality. So it's like you don't cheat on your wife because there are a lot of religions that are going to say that's not okay, and so there's this kind of moral guideline. It's not necessarily a law. It's just that we think of it as right or wrong.
Right.
And then other people that aren't necessarily religious, they take a different approach where they think that human beings by nature are moral, that we are meant to be, social creatures, and that we would find our own morality. But you look at something like this and you see, it's one thing, obviously Hitler coming into power, pushing this agenda and this movement and this mindset. But I guess what kills me the most, it's one thing to have the extremist at the top. It's another thing to think that how millions of people were behind this or supportive of this and helped this to happen. It's like maybe there isn't any, like, is morality a natural? How do you convince that many people?
Right. That always kind of boggled my mind. You know what I mean? I think that everybody shared the same idealism. I think a lot of people didn't know exactly how far it would go. I mean, if you look at it, the whole, about exterminating and cleansing out, the Jewish population, it wasn't something that the Germans, per se, civilians essentially knew. They knew they were getting deported. They knew they were like, they were getting kicked out of Germany, or they knew that they were just bad people, right? They were like, oh, the Jews are bad, and the fucking communists are bad, and all that. But they actually kept it a secret for as long as possible. Now, trying to get the army and the SS and all that to be part of it, they're saying when they started capturing the Nazis after the war, they're like, oh, well, I know it's horrible, but I had orders to do it. You can't can't sit there and use that as an excuse. You know what I mean? I mean, there are certain threshold where. Do
you think there were instances of like officers getting fragged and shit because like do you think there was like internal like soldier kind of uproars and shit, you know what I mean?
I will tell you this, man. Just within the whole Nazi party, there have been, I forget how many attempts just to kill Hitler. You know what I mean? So just because everybody was a Nazi didn't really mean that everybody sympathizes with the ideology of it, right? Because a lot of people even look at the German army in general, the Wehrmacht and all that. They did their shit. They they were professional soldiers. They also did atrocities, right? But they weren't involved with what the SS Nazis were actually doing, So it was the entire thing of exterminating these people was a top secret thing.
Well, and I will say, so, if we go as far as to say that, for the mass majority of the population, they were protected from knowing the really horrific truth. But we still were able, Hitler and the Nazis were still able to convince the majority that Jews were bad. Now, whether they just thought it was getting deported or whatever, but it's like, I guess for me, it boggles my mind to even get there. Like, what?
Well, I think, also you got to realize that Germany was got defeated in the First World War. They got humiliated. The national patriotism was taken away. Everything. I mean, the whole country was in shambles.
Yeah.
So then you get this guy, Hitler, that comes into power and kind of, just kind of like brings a pulse back to the German people about, being pure and being, the Aryan race and all that crazy shit. So now, you start taking it out on the people that he wanted to create this race. He wanted to show people that the German race was pure. And in order to do that, you had to get rid of all the quote unquote undesirables.
Well, and I've said this before, guys, is we live in a world of social influence, and everybody's familiar with that term now. And something that irks me, because this is a part of my living currently, is to try to encourage and motivate and tell stories and inspire and build a following. Man, that power, you've got to, you just got to realize how powerful that is. And it pisses me off to see people, even on small levels in today's world, being irresponsible with their message, because the human mind seems to be able to just kind of follow somebody so easily.
Right.
And God, it just, what an ultimate example of just like the negative social influence.
Yeah, just think about if let's say everything got turned into a positive light. You know what I mean? Just imagine just as much evil that he brought to the world. Just think about the opposite side. If you would have went, on the positive side of things, how much good. You know what I mean? Because he was a charismatic leader. He was somebody that knew how to get people to listen to, and he knew what the people wanted to hear. And I don't care what the actions were; those are the facts. Because otherwise you don't create that kind of influence to go on something on this biblical scale of just mass murdering.
Well, we see things all the time, and again, I know these are really micro examples, but all the time, like let's say you're associated with a certain political party, you seem to have the ability to forgive something with that political leader that you would never forgive in another scenario, because for whatever reason you've attached emotionally to that person. You know what I mean? So it is interesting, like, and even religious leaders, like we've seen people that would never really stand behind a certain action, but like, well, but this is kind of on our team, so we gotta get over it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, and also, so this entire thing, and what's he was. And when I say smart, I'm not saying smart in a way of like, he was really smart, but more in the fact that, he already knew what the mission needed to be. His goal was to cleanse the race. You know what I mean? And but he started doing it slowly, right? So when the Nazis came into power, the first thing that he did, he introduced the Nuremberg laws, which essentially were laws that said if you're a Jew, then you can't own a business, you can't work, you can't, just really restricting that freedom.
Now, was that, I don't know if you know all the timelines, but it's my understanding. So the Jews started to be kind of segregated and their rights were taken away from them. It wasn't until World War II started, though, that they had to wear the star, right?
That honestly, I don't know, to be honest. So, but what I do know is that in the early years before World War II actually, quote unquote, kicked off, concentration camps or labor camps were already being built. Guys were already getting, prisoners were already being sent over there to work, to build on the war machine, which eventually would feed, the German army to go into the war. Mm-hmm. But they started slowly segregating people, right? It became a norm to say, oh, look, that's a Jew. Like, that's different, that's disgusting, or that's, you know what I mean? So you start seeing that again and again, it becomes normal, and then you get detached as a human, right? So now you're segregating this population, and on top of...
Aren't they also having like children born into this life like that?
I get to that, yeah. So you got, you started separating all these people, then you start getting rid of all the mentally ill, the gays, the gypsies, all the people that you feel that they're just undesirable, right? But first you used to kind of like kill them, off in the asylums or things like that, right? But what people knew is that all these Jews and everybody was getting kicked out of Germany. They were literally telling people, what the government was telling people was like, hey, they're undesirables. We don't want them here. We're just kicking them out. That's all we're doing. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. So the population, their thought process.
Their thought process was that, man, like he's cleaning up Germany of all these undesirables, right? And that's it. They thought they were going to work somewhere else, or maybe some other country was going to take them or some shit.
They're going,
you know what I mean?
They're going back to the land of the Jews. They're all going to be happy on a farm.
Yeah. And that's, so that's the part of, so they had the Nazis had a very elaborate way of, how can I say this? Like, they had systematically moved. So then it started when they invaded Poland in 1939. They started rounding up all the Jews there, right? Started putting them into ghettos. But it was all coordinated. It was all planned out. So then in 1942, they had the 1C conference. I don't know how to pronounce it, but essentially it was like the top leadership of the German government. So you had kind of like saying like Department of Justice, that kind of deal, just all there. Now Hitler and Himmler and like the really top guys were not there, and for obvious reasons, right? So they had this meeting to really talk about the Jewish question, as in like, what are we going to do with all these Jews? How do we get rid of them? It was a 2-hour meeting of essentially talking about how to systematically get rid of Jews. And there is one transcript still to this day that actually records that entire conversation.
Wow.
Right? And it talks about, okay, if going back to what you were saying, if a kid is born to a Jewish family, how Jewish is he? Right? And they're saying, okay, well, if his mom is 80% Jew, but the husband is German, he's still a Jew.
It's so weird because it's like back then you're not doing ancestry.com to mail off your DNA.
But the Germans were organized, man. They went through your entire
lineage.
Entire lineage, man. And it's kind of like, okay, if your grandma was Jew, but everybody was German, you were still a German, So,
so they had these concentration camps, and one thing I didn't know until today was that the concentration camps and these kill camps, or the extermination camps, they were different. And what I'm curious about to start, so they're sending people into concentration camps. What was the justification of the concentration camp? The design was hard labor, right?
Yes.
Or to provide into the country.
Right, like Auschwitz and like Dachau and all these were actual labor slave camps. Okay, now there were some summary executions. There were people that died. It was appalling conditions. But the entire idea of there's only 3 camps that became extermination camps: Belzec, Treblinka, and Sobibor. They were literally built specifically and for one reason only, to just murder people. That was it. A train came in, unloaded, murdered them. Another one came in, got murdered. Auschwitz and they got developed into killing camps, but they had again, labor camps. So when you get off the train, they would say, okay, these guys are getting killed, these guys are going to work, and these guys are going to do some other shit. That's essentially how it was built. But Treblinka, Sobibor, and Belzec, all in Poland, they were literally kill camps, extermination camps. That was it, right? And what's even interesting about, just kind of show you how deprived the mind was, when I had this meeting in 1942, they were trying to sit there to like, okay, well, what's the best way of killing these guys? We tried bullets, it's too expensive. We tried gassing them into trucks. They would literally pull up with a van.
Oh yeah, they gas buses or something like that.
Load them in there and gas them. And then they're like, well, how do we get rid of them? How can we kill? And they actually had like all these mathematical equations, about how to exterminate people. Like
it's mind blowing to think. So when you scale this, right? It's one thing, like it's horrifying to even imagine. Just one person gets killed, as an example, you know, and so we think about that, we try to quantify that, and then you go a step further where you see, like, let's say 11 million people that get killed during this event, and that's to such a level where they're literally trying to figure out the most economical way to do this.
It's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's they got to the point where the killings became so efficient. They were like in Auschwitz in 1944, just within that summer, they wiped out 400,000 people in less than 3 months. They were literally killing almost 10,000 people a day. I mean, the lengths that they went through to keep it a secret and to actually I mean, think about this, right? These people, and a lot of people, what blows my mind, a lot of guys are like, well, why don't we just rebel? There was all these, if you got 3,000, 10,000 people in that camp, why don't they all just rebel? Because it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? They got duped and they got psychology fucked up or tricked up until the very, 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 very end. They studied it. The Germans studied it so they didn't cause any panics. There wouldn't be any outbreaks. So the Jews that went there, they thought they were going out there to fucking work or to do some other things. Nobody would believe, even though there were rumors, even though there were evidence that the killings were going, nobody had the idea of saying, like, there's no way that's happening. I mean, we gotta be. Right. This gotta be. We're going out there to work for the war effort. We're not being killed.
Yeah.
Who does that?
Well, I think what's interesting is and again, we got to separate the work camps or the concentration camps from the kill, the systematic kill. Which was it sounds like they were actually moving Jews from the concentration camps over.
Well, so like Auschwitz had the concentration. They're all like Auschwitz is like the biggest one of them all, but had a bunch of like sub camps, right? So you had like the women camp here, you had the male camps, you had the ammunition factories here, but they were just still killing people, man, regardless of it.
I saw this right here, man.
Mauthausen, yeah.
Mauthausen. And this was apparently the most brutal concentration camp. And we were kind of reading through some of this stuff, and it's crazy. And now what I was trying to find, I didn't find anything really good, but apparently there was different grades of these camps, and they're calling this a grade 3. So I don't know if it's like the severity.
Probably, most likely.
But some of the stuff that they were doing in this concentration camp was just incredibly brutal. And like one of them, they were talking about this staircase it was this concrete, basically, where they had to carry a huge concrete, stone on their back and go up and down this 180 stair deal like multiple times just to literally almost exhaust you to death. Like the whole idea.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. Immediately getting there, you have to have a realization though in your mind at some point that if this isn't just a work camp. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
There's got to be a point where you like, and I'm not saying that, that should have led to an uproar or whatever, but like there had to have been a harsh awakening when you get there and you realize like, this is not just some work camp. Like people are getting.
Yeah. But once you're there, it's too late, man.
Right.
I mean,
and they're weak and tired, underfed.
I mean, there has been, for example, they had actually an uprising in Auschwitz. The guy that the Southern Commandos, which I'll get into, were actually blew up one of the ovens at the crematoriums, escaped, but they ended up killing all of them. But there were some uprisings, you know what I mean? There was an underground network. They used to smuggle photos. There was only like 4 photos. There are to this day still there, they were ever taken during the actual killings. You know what I mean? It's called the Southern Commandos photographs. So a lot of people also say like, oh, the West and everybody knew what was happening. I personally believe that people knew what was happening, but nobody really cared about doing anything about it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So because stories were coming in, there was kind of the writings on the wall were there, when the Jews and everybody was escaping Europe because the war started. Rumors were going around, they already knew what the intentions were. So we kind of dropped the ball on that one. And here's the deal. I know it's a touchy subject, man. I'm just literally calling how I see it. So with that in mind, man, everybody, the World War II, every war has got a dark side. And this, when the Americans and the Russians ended up liberating these camps, they actually got to see the evidence of what was happening. And because it was so secret, the Germans were trying to do everything in their power to, get rid of all the evidence when they realized that the war was lost. So what they used to do, for example, Treblinka, they leveled that whole thing to the ground, killed everybody, and the rest that they started moving them towards Germany. They literally wiped everything out and then planted a bunch of trees. Like if you go there, like it's like literally like nothing was ever there. You know what I mean? Or they would take like mass graves and they would dig out all the bodies from the mass graves, burn them, and then they would throw the bones into a machine so it could ground it into like a chalky powder, and then that would get dispersed. They would do everything just to get rid of the evidence.
So why hide from it? So with such an extremist mindset, where you're scared of the rest of the world finding out, and then that's gonna, I guess, just the consequences of just
Well, let's be honest, man. I mean, what would you do, right? I mean, you're on top of the world because you're conquering Europe, right? Now you're thinking you're going to lose it. Well, I guess everybody's going to look out for themselves now. You know what I mean?
No, I see. So you're losing that influence.
Yeah, everybody's going to lose from. Everybody's thinking about themselves, man. So
well, I mean, I think that's the great that's the great paradox of ego is that we see these charismatic, larger than life individuals that do influence on large scales, and you're rolling the dice in a heavy hand. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely, man. And I'll tell you what, man. I mean, one thing, there's a unit, I did a post this a while back, it was called the Schindler Commandos. And basically what it was is when you get off the train, they had a selection process. You had, men, women, kids, old people, right? And if you went to the left, you got killed. If you went to the right, you went to work, that kind of deal. But then it would pick like a very select few Jews who were physically fit, and their sole job was to dispose of all the bodies that got put into the gas chambers, to burn all the bodies.
Wow.
Now they lived in separate quarters in a separate, facility. They got better rations, because they needed them healthy. And their job was specifically that. And it's not like they were told, hey, by the way, you're going to be doing this. They were obviously forced under the threat of their own deaths to do it.
Right.
And it was very, how can I say this? Like, it was very common for them to be burying their own family members, their own brothers or sisters or daughters or sons.
That's crazy.
So,
Jesus Christ.
I've read some witnesses where they were saying a part of me would, because it would walk them into the gas chambers. Obviously, they thought, the Jews thought they were, taking a shower or cleansing or whatever. He said, I don't know if I should tell them that they're getting ready to die, but why should I? Because then it's just going to make their last moments even more horrible.
Right.
So they would sit there, they would gas them. It would last about 10 to 20 minutes. And when the screams died off and everybody died, they walked in with these big ass like meat hooks, grab all the bodies, bring them upstairs, throw them into the ovens, burn everything up. And if the ovens were too full, they would take them out back, and just picture like this massive grill, and they would throw all these bodies in there and just burn them, and then take all the ashes, and then they would dump them into the river. That was a constant routine every single day. But because the Germans knew that these Southern Commandos now were they used to call them the bearer of secrets, they would kill them off. They would wipe all, they would just kill all of them about every 3 months and then replace them with new ones. So by the end of the war, only 20 of these guys ever survived, and they had killed off almost 14 generations of these commandos, right? Now, they didn't take part in the killings because that was specifically reserved for the SS. But it's just, how do you live with that? And I remember specifically one guy that he saw his family members going to the gas chamber, and he wanted to go in with them. And I think his mom or sister said, hey, don't. You need to live through this so you can tell about it. I mean, how can you say...
Jesus Christ, man.
It's some hard shit, man.
That is horrifying.
Some hard shit, man. Let that sink in for a second, man. And what's even more degrading and disgusting, man, they used to pull the gold teeth out. They used to take all the luggages. They used to cut all the hair. The hair, they used to make socks out of hair. That's nuts.
The only way that you can even begin to wrap your mind around like the horrific concept of this is that the German, whether it was the SS or Hitler, but the people that are doing this and pushing this narrative genuinely felt like these people were not people.
Yes.
Subhumans.
Yep,
subhumans, like degrading. You think of how, and I think it's equally as disgusting, but the way some people are with animals or whatever, right?
Sure.
And it is, we step on a bug and we don't think anything of it. And it's like they had this mindset around like human beings.
That's right. Yeah.
It just blows.
They used to
my
conduct
mind.
human experiments, specifically in Auschwitz. And there was this guy, his name was Dr. Mengele, and he was like, they used to call him the angel of death because he was very charismatic, very good looking guy, but he was just this evil thing. And he did a lot of experiments, but one thing that he had a super quote unquote evil niche on was actually twins. He was obsessed with twins. So anytime twins came to the camp, he took them to the side, he treated them well and all that, and did all these horrible experiments. They used to like get to a point where he was trying to he even sewn like two twins together to see, or maybe chop an arm of one and then chop the other and then put, switch arms. And like, it was just some disgusting shit that happened. I mean,
I heard about these experiments, and I guess, I don't know. I guess it makes you wonder, like, what was the agenda? What were they looking to do? I mean, obviously making some sort of medical advancements
it was more to, to kind of like advance the research on like, the race and genealogy and anatomy and all of that. That was one of the main things. And also they used to like, I mean, if you had to run even gear, for example, they wanted to test out these new suits for German Stuka dive bombers for the pilots. To see if they could survive in, let's say, in the winter weather or like in the ice cold water. Well, guess what? Take a Jew and throw them in a vat of ice water and see if it works. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So unfortunately, it's. I mean, just some of the horrible things that happen. I mean, if you're a woman, a baby, old guy, you're done.
Was there any, and look, excuse my ignorance on this, was there any support or any sort of alliance from other parts of the world?
There were, man. I mean, when they invaded like Bulgaria and Hungary, there were like these little puppet allies or whatever you want to call it. You know what I mean? And they helped out deporting Jews. They would go out there and try to arrest, gypsies and Jews and communism and communists.
Any major powers that were a part of that? I mean, any like...
I mean, not allies. No, not that I know of. No. I mean,
I guess I'm curious on like if there was any sort of from other countries, and then if they knew what was going on. If there was any. I
think a lot of countries knew. I even heard, I read somewhere that the United States actually knew within like the 1941, as early as 1942, they already knew what was happening because they would get reports and they were even flying over concentration camps and never bomb them.
So what, I guess that runs into the, and it depending on how much the United States knows, but you start to get into this whole like world police conversation.
Sure.
But it's like, God, it's like you can't let that level of inhumanity just happen. You can't. It doesn't matter who you are. But then in the same breath, I guess, I don't know, just it's not as easy as just invading somebody's country or understanding it all. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of bothersome to me. It makes you wonder, like, I wonder how much the United States knew.
Well, I'll put it this way, man. How believable could everything that we just narrated and this is just how believable would that be, right? I mean, anybody in their right mind would say there's no fucking way whatever you just said is happening. There's just no way. Like, it's just unconceivable. There's no way that anybody could be doing this. There's no way that, like, I mean, it's just like, it just cannot comprehend it, right? I mean, you're literally thinking of this, how many people they were rounding up. I mean, they used to take train loads of people, and sometimes they used to have so many of them that the trains had to like stay on the tracks for like a day just to clear up. You know what I mean? If somebody told you that we're throwing people in ovens, if somebody told you that we're gassing people by the thousands on a daily basis, would you believe it? And it's hard.
The thing that pushed us to the edge was Pearl Harbor, right? Like, that's what, I mean, eventually.
So basically, we always thought that World War II was a Euro problem. And then obviously, we used to give, we were giving aid to the British and the French and all of that. But then when Pearl Harbor came, we quote unquote literally just declared war. And then like a few days later, Germany declared war on us. And that's kind of how it started. And
now, does Japan have any idea of the German initiative?
Well, I'll put it this way. Japan was doing their own fucking genocides. I mean, they were in China. It was called the Rape of Nanking, where they murdered and just women, children, people, like by the hundreds of thousands. And I think it was like in 1937 when Japan was invading Asia. So they were doing their own mass murdering. So whether they cared about Jews or not, I don't know. But they were committing their own atrocities, believe me on that one. So it was just, they were just cleansing all these people out. I mean, it's just, again, it's hard to fathom. It's hard to think about.
Yeah. And, I guess we live in such an age, or at least here in the United States for sure, that we live in such an era of equality and conversations around being open-ended about, just people that are different, that maybe at one point in history weren't looked at the same way, whether
Sure.
that's gay marriage or equality with women or, racism. And we're in a time of I think, some level of sensitivity, because understandably so, is like everybody wants to be able to have the same opportunity as the next person, and I think that's the morality in a lot of what the United States was built on. But man, it does put into perspective when you think back at some of the level of things that have gone on like this, and it's not to discredit. Obviously, slavery was we can go into a whole nother thing on that, but it's like it's interesting to put that perspective. And I think, I'm like, man, my rights aren't equal as a father as the mother is. And I'm like, and I'm of course complaining about that, but I'm like, man, there are people that literally at one point in history were not looked at as people. That you were no better than a stray dog that I'm going to experiment on and then just throw away. That is just,
I will
gross.
tell you what, man, I went to the Holocaust Museum in Dallas, and very moving. Just if you have a chance to go, obviously go to the one in DC. It's much deeper and bigger and whatnot. But when I went to this one in Dallas, towards the last part of the museum, they had this room, and it was like all made out of marble, and the entire wall had all the names etched in there, right? But if you look closer, it wouldn't just say like CJ or G or whatever. It would literally say like the Jones family, or literally entire families wiped out, complete generations gone like that. It's terrifying that as humans we got to such a level.
Yeah, and it's terrifying that kind of influence, like there could be that kind of influence, that could
absolutely.
be a real thing. And it puts into, it makes you think about, like, there are people that have a lot of like opinions about the Iraq war, and we obviously went in and decided to make a decision. We were worried about Saddam Hussein, was an incredibly, fucked up human being in himself. And of course, he gave birth to a bunch of minions of fucked up motherfuckers.
Yep.
And then we look at things going on in North Korea, and some people have criticisms on whether or not, like, we should be involved in these things. And we can go back and forth. I have my 2 cents on it, but without opinions, we do have to take very seriously that these kind of disgusting dictators, these kind of like influencers can make things like this happen. We watched it happen.
That's right. Yeah. And again, the whole reason why the Holocaust happened and why it happened is there's a massive list of how it all unfolded. What's even interesting though, I get a lot of people that they're like, well, so the Holocaust happened, World War II, the Nazis, all of that. How is the German people now dealing with it, right? So I did some research and it was actually pretty interesting. You would figure that nobody would talk about it, or like they're like, oh my God, it's still fresh.
Right.
Believe it or not, they actually do talk about it. They actually do teach it. They actually don't really shy away from it. There are still Nazi sympathizers, believe it or not. Not just in Germany, but around the world, there are. It's very small, but there are out there. And like some of the schools, every year they go to the Holocaust memorial.
Right.
In their towns or in Berlin or whatever, and they clean all the graves, and kind of like, I wouldn't say paying homage, but kind of like I don't know how to explain it. Just as a sign.
I think that we always, like, look, I've not been a perfect human being most of my life, all right? Like, I've definitely had my moments of bad decisions and things that you can't take back, Like, I went through a couple of divorces. There are things I wish I would have done differently. And I think there's multiple ways to look at that. I can turn away from my bad decisions and pretend like it wasn't there, or I can face them like a man. And I think that there is some level of, I think there is a lot of respect of Germans being able to look right in the mirror, accept the scar, and own it, I respect that. I'm glad that you said that, because that actually that makes me feel good that's
don't get me wrong. Obviously anything that's anything Nazi related is completely illegal. That's why, like, if you ever watch a World War II movie in Germany, you will never see the swastika anywhere. They all get censored out, and rightfully so, because they don't want people to, kind of like re-engage into the whole mentality of it,
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be said about never letting that see the light. You know what I mean? It's like you don't even deserve to, like, that logo doesn't even deserve.
Right, and and a lot of people think, like, the swastika, for example, that's actually a Indian symbol, believe it or not. It was actually way before then. It's not like the Nazis invented that symbol, like that was just kind of a side
Do you know
thing.
what it meant? Like in the Native American, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, like
Indian.
From
Okay,
India, yeah.
Got it.
It's actually one of their symbols, but believe it or not, actually, there was an army unit who actually had the swastika as their symbol, but it wasn't because of Nazism. It was just the symbol. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a tough
I'm
one,
gonna tell you another thing too. It was actually pretty interesting. I saw an article a while back. There's a very small town in southern Germany, right? And there's like a church in there, and it's like, dude, it's like 1,100 years old, dude. It's like fucking old, man. But the bell it was a bell, like the church bell was actually given by Adolf Hitler, I believe, and it's got his name, it's got the swastika and all of that.
Wow.
So there's one person in that town that says we need to take it down because it's, it's got Hitler's name on it, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are like, you need to mind your own fucking business and let it be, and it's part of history, and it is what it is, and but it's like every time the bell rings, you're sounding off to.
Well, we deal with some of that here. I mean, you think just recently we've had issues with monuments and the what do you call it? The damn rebel flag, we had issues with that, and there's still people that, and I always thought that was an interesting one because, there's one side of it that says like history is history and we should own that. And I think with like what the Germans do where they go to the memorial and they face it, they're not scared of it, they teach it. I agree with that. Now, whether or not I agree that you need to be like waving a bunch of rebel flags in your fucking yard and shit because you're proud of that, I don't know, man. I'm not trying to compare the two, but it's like one of those things where I think that that's an interesting topic. You know what I mean? It's like, it's one thing like, the Holocaust happened. You don't need to be wearing fucking like Nazi symbols,
right?
So I don't know. We see some of that here in the States, just to kind of parallel, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, man. But and like I said, this is just a quick overview about it. About what we know about the Holocaust, and again, you can sit and talk about hours about just how everything happened and the euthanasia program. They're actually they were in the beginning that in order to before completely killing them. They were trying to
make it so they couldn't reproduce.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So they're like, well, that takes too long. They just kill them. You know what I mean? Like, that's what that meeting was about. And in fact, when that meeting was happening, when they had all the head of states, it was more of like they thought they went in there to really discuss, like, okay, how do we put how do we solve this quote unquote problem, right? The Jewish question. That's what we used to call it. And as they were going through the plan, some of the head of states were like, wait a second, do we really want to kill them all? Isn't that like, that's kind of like, and what a lot of people don't know is that during that meeting, the two guys that were running it, they were like, listen, we're already killing them. We're just letting you know so you motherfuckers get on the same plan. That's essentially what it was. So they're like, we're not here to ask your permission. We're already doing it. You just need to be on board with it.
From what I read, they called that the final solution. And that's when they really started taking, you started trucking them from concentration camps into these.
The final solution was literally, how do we just get rid of, the final solution to the Jewish question. That's essentially what they called it. And again, Hitler and Himmler, they weren't there at that meeting. Why? Because they weren't stupid enough to quote unquote bear responsibility for it,
I know. I feel like we're going back to the beginning with this, but do you feel okay? So Hitler influences people to believe that the Jewish people are literally not even people; they're worthless, whatever. So getting in the mind, and that is fucking ridiculous. Getting in the mind of someone like Hitler. Is this a religious motive? Is this like a fucking childhood thing? Is it like what?
I just think it's
what happened.
I just think it's evil, dude.
So you think just straight up, just like the Joker, want to see it burn down?
I just think it's just straight fucking evil, dude. I think the guy was just a complete. His reasoning behind
Do you think that there was ego and power that was attached to that, or do you think that it's
shit, dude? I mean, the guy was just. I don't even know what adjectives I can find to actually explain the guy. I mean, to me, somebody that's willing to go to those lengths to make a point, man, you're just fucking evil, dude. I mean,
yeah.
Bottom line for me, dude.
Yeah,
I mean, you can have all the. I mean, he did. You know, when he wrote Mein Kampf, and he had this hatred. You know what I mean? He just got into power and was able to do it. You know, nobody stopped him. Even when, you know, it was funny because when Hitler came to power, he said, okay, because you know, so when World War I, when they lost the First World War, you know, one of the deals was that Germany could not have an army. They could only have enough army to defend themselves. Okay, but they started building underneath. You know, they started secretly building their army. So then they invaded Austria. And they're like, what the fuck are you doing? They're like, well, we just want Austria because it used to belong to Germany. People are like, all right, cool, whatever, fine. And then he invaded the Rhinelands. Like, what are you doing? Oh, well, I just want to take that. That's it, right? So at the end of the day, like, the guy was able to dupe a lot of people, man. France, England, I mean, everybody. And then, you know, this whole thing kicked off. I mean, and then when he invaded Poland, Russia invaded as well. And even though he hated fucking communists, he made a deal with Stalin to say, all right, man, I'm going to take half of Poland, you take the other half, and we're good. And then Hitler said, well, fuck that, and he invaded Russia anyways, and that cost him the entire war. But the point being is he was that charismatic that he could even take the enemy to be like, all right, cool, man, like, whatever. You know what I mean? That's just evil, dude. And then to go to these lengths of architecting, you know, to being an architect of a mass murdering machine, dude. I mean, that's just evil.
I heard this in like a quick little passing at one point, and I have no validity behind this, but somebody had mentioned that there's a possibility that Hitler could have had Jewish blood.
I actually heard about that. It's funny. Somebody said, I heard somewhere that thing is like,
I mean, that'd really hurt your initiative.
You want to know what's even more funnier?
Huh?
So he had. So he was all about propaganda, right? Kind of like you know, Facebook and like kind of like our version, right?
Sure.
So he had this baby, this little kid, must have been a couple years old, and he chose her because she was like the representation of Germany. Okay, kind of like, you know, this is like the purest baby out there.
Right.
Well, what his dumbass didn't know is that girl was actually Jew. She was Jewish.
Shit.
Yeah.
So did he ever? I mean, did you find out?
I don't think he did. No. But later on, I found out that. And again, I don't know the full story behind it.
I wonder, like, how do you feel being that little girl growing up? I mean, it's not your fault, but like you're the face of a brand like that you didn't even know any better. You know what I mean?
Man. It's
that fucking sucks.
I mean, I can only imagine that maybe down the road, you know, like as you grow up, you kind of like, damn, that was just fucked up, and realize like, you know, it's just, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's the kind of the world we live in. Is like I think about that sometimes, like some of the things that I do, and I'm like, you know, let's say that I'm a spokesperson for a company or something, and it's like, I can't control necessarily what the company's going to do. Like I can control what I'm willing to do, but like that company now.
Because if you don't like it, you say, guys, I'm out of here. I don't support the message, and I'm gone. You know what I mean? We know what's even funny about Hitler is that I think he had a cousin or half brother what actually served in the U.S. Army. Believe it or not, in the or maybe it was the U.S. Navy. So
now, when he, I know this is conspiracy theory, but some people question his death, right?
In my opinion, a lot of people did that. A lot of people think that he just escaped to Argentina, which a lot of Nazis actually did, believe it or not. In fact, the guy who was the architect of the Holocaust, Reinhardt. He escaped to Germany, and the Israeli Mossad, which is like the special, like CIA special force or whatever you want to call them, they actually went there, snatched him out of Argentina, brought him back, and he was hung in Israel for it. Really? So they were actually hunting Nazis, you know, after the war. They weren't gonna forget that one. But Hitler, no, there's no way. You know, and what's funny about I was watching this series. It was called like Nazi Hunters, and a lot of them fled to South America. Argentina and all the Paraguay, Uruguay, they just kind of like,
I was going to ask why, like, what is
they
it
just
about?
kind of let them in, it was more of like, we don't really care. So they just let them in. And they had other names and they stopped building little German colonies. And they found one Nazi, and I forget who it was or the name. But basically, it's like all these Germans rented out this hotel and were having the birthday party for Hitler in this hotel.
Wow.
And one of the persons saw that and they ended up catching a bunch of Nazis there because of it. And
you were saying that in Nazi youth was a whole that was like the next generation.
Yeah, basically just think about like ROTC. There you go.
Okay.
Like just the Hitler youth. I mean, it's just think about like Boy Scouts / ROTC to be built to be this great Aryan whatever, perfect race or whatever the fuck you want to call it, like baby Nazis, I guess you can call it.
And a lot of those guys had to spend a good chunk of their life, I'm assuming, having to deal with the fact that they have that label on them.
That forever, I don't know, to be honest. I mean, I that's a good question.
Are you going to get forgiven? I don't know how many of them were just kids or whatever at the time, but
the Hitler Youth was like, they were like, just think about like middle school and high school and elementary school. I mean, it's not like they went out there and killed Jews or anything like that. I mean, they were just being trained to be Nazis.
Yeah.
And again, man,
still doesn't look good on your resume. Leave that one off the resume.
Yeah, don't write that in. But it's just, how he has some grandiose plans. I mean, Hitler had he wanted to create one capital, he wanted to conquer the world and clean all the races that he didn't want to. I mean, it's pretty bold, man, but it's nothing is impossible.
He declared war on the United States after we jumped in with the Japan situation. Right. So you think this guy was convinced that he would be able to conquer the United States?
Yeah, he was. If England didn't hold on, if England would have fell, I guarantee you that his next target was going to be the U.S. Now, would he have beaten us? I don't know. I highly doubt it.
Yeah,
just because we're Americans, man.
Well, it's hard for me to quantify like how powerful some of these other great powers were or are now.
Well, the U.S., like Japan or whatever, they underestimated us. I mean, we came. The World War II brought us up from the Great Depression. I mean, you started. You were building cars. Well, guess what? You're building bombs. You were building, refrigerators. Well, now you're going to be building tanks. I mean, so you were dealing with a massive, like production, dude. You know what I mean? The country that was just producing thousands of ships and planes and bullets and.
Is it cool with you? I don't know. I mean, if we want to go ahead and just on the fly pick our next topic, but I would love maybe for the next podcast or one of the future ones, I'd love to be able to talk about the Pearl Harbor and the bombing. I'd love to talk about Hiroshima. I think that'd be interesting. Yeah, man. A lot of people, a lot of good insight. I actually got to talk to a couple Pearl Harbor survivors, man, and every World War II that I've ever interviewed and talked to, man, it was that was like the defining moment of kind of like saying like, let's go kick some ass, man. Well, and I think that nuclear warfare is something that a lot of us probably we fear, but we all don't understand, and I don't know, just that experience. I think that's an interesting one to wrap your mind around. Yeah, because that kind of leads into the whole Cold War. I mean, the reason why we built so many weapons and nukes and all kinds of shit just to World War III, man. I mean, it could have happened like that. So it's pretty interesting. It's actually, we get a lot of people that are like, why do we nuke Japan? Because when we were trying to invade the fucking country, we were expecting. Here's the thing about it. We were supposed to invade Japan, and we were expecting. I don't even know how many thousands of casualties, right? So, in order to plan for that, the company that does the Purple Heart. Made like 54,000 of them. In fact, to this day, we're still issuing out the same Purple Hearts from that batch. Wow. Believe it or not. So that's how many casualties they thought it was going to happen. But then we dropped the nukes and they didn't get it the first time. And, second time is a charm. There you go. Jeez. So. All right, guys. Well, it was a little bit of a bleak one, but you know what, guys? I mean, that's again kind of one of the things that Zero. I think it's good to dive into that. It's good to really think on that and to understand that. And so, absolutely, man. If you guys enjoyed it, do us a huge favor. If you're on YouTube or wherever you can comment, just drop a comment down below. Let us know what you think. Your feedback's really really important to us. Also consider subscribing. We got these coming out every Tuesday. So every Tuesday we should have a new podcast launch it. So just stick around. And also any suggestions, man, drop your suggestions down below. We'd love to hear it. Oh, and we should let them know about some new things. We have Mortal Kombat shirts.
Yeah. Right now we got Mortal Kombat shirts being pre-ordered. I like games, man. I wanted to bring something old school, and I figured a lot of you guys would enjoy it. So
it's the only game that I ever got into really was Mortal Kombat. So
Dude,
I'm so excited about it. The Sub-Zero one is dope, man.
Yeah. So
really, both of them are dope.
Make sure you snag on it, man. If you're into coffee, we still got a coffee running up, man. So let us know what you think.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.
Later, guys.